What is good, everyone? This is your host, Deanna Radulescu with Label Free Podcast. To live your best life, you must live label free. As always, bringing you incredible guests from all over the world. So sit back, relax, and tune in. My next guest is a founder and chairman, TurnLab CEO and founder. He's a recent cancer survivor, devoted family man, and insatiable adventurer. Please welcome Howard Chang. Howard, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me. Happy to be here.
Happy to have you. You've got quite the story. You've been an entrepreneur at a very young age.
Yeah, I unofficially my entrepreneurship started at 14 when I borrowed, in quotation marks, my dad's lawnmower and started cutting lawns in the neighborhood.
Yeah.
He didn't know I was doing it. I actually ended up ruining his lawnmower over the summer, but I made enough money to buy him a brand new lawnmower and buy myself a brand new racing bicycle because I was into cycling at the time.
Yeah.
And so that was sort of my first kind of dipping my toes into entrepreneurship at 14. And then I kind of started my first real business at 20. And it's never really stopped. I've been a serial entrepreneur since.
I love it. Well, we have that in common though. I started babysitting, cleaning houses, and cutting grass at 13. So I like me and my best friend at the time made these flyers, and we within a 2 mile radius, I like drawed flyers at every single house within a 2 mile radius of where I lived. And yeah, and then I did the paper out. So I feel you on being an entrepreneur. So your first business wasn't exactly as successful as the one that you have now.
Well, the first business I started when I was 20, I was in the middle of finishing my degree in architecture, and I thought, wow, the most logical thing to do would be start a bike shop in my 20s, which, again, kind of accidentally. I had a friend who started
Yeah.
a shop, needed some help. I started helping him, and about 6 months in, he said, this is just too much for me. Give me a couple of $1,000. I'll hand over the keys. You can take over the shop. So this is back in the 80s, and
Okay.
we thought everything was possible in the 80s, even though the
Yeah.
interest rates were 13, 14%. And we were we all had we're at stars in our eyes and what we could do.
Yeah.
So I
Sure.
built a business, and I will say that the business was very successful for many years. By the time I was 25, I was driving a brand new Porsche. I had a beautiful house down by
Wow.
the water in Toronto. And then in 29, it all went under. Kept trying to grow the business. I opened up to three different locations
Wow.
and try to fund it on 17% bank interest. And apparently that's not a good thing.
No.
Um,
Holy cow.
and the bank basically said, look, they have my house, all these assets, and they basically called their line. Because if you remember, 1989 was the big recession that happened,
Yeah.
and all the real estate prices dropped out in North America. And the bank basically said, let's get our money out now. So,
Yeah.
we weren't actually in default of anything, but they called the line, and I was forced to put my business into receivership. So very humbling. I went from this high flying young guy in my 20s to living in my parents' basement as a single dad with two kids, because I
Wow.
lost everything, lost the business, lost my house, my wife left me. It was a disaster. But you got to start again, right? And that's
Yeah.
sort of what I had to do at 29.
Wow. What a lot of the experience at a young age. I can't even imagine going through that. That's pretty heavy. And now where you are today.
Well, I would say it was probably an amazing lesson. Like you look back,
Sure.
I tell people, cancer for me was an incredible gift as well. I would say the bankruptcy taught me so much about business and so much about things like cash flow management and using debt financing, and all these things were kind of in that crucible of the bankruptcy, you're forced to learn a lot, right? And then as I built my new businesses, I didn't make those same mistakes again. And now, I've had several startups and exits since then. I built, a lot of personal net worth over the years um, by doing the things that I wish I knew in my 20s.
Yeah.
And the other thing I wish I did in my 20s is I wish I didn't think I was the smartest kid in the room. I really wish I asked for more advice. I think
Yeah.
that was definitely a problem I face. I think a lot of young entrepreneurs sort of have that. We think we should do it on our own. I want to be a self-made man or self-made woman when really there is no such thing. Like it takes a
No.
village to create anything, right? So I wish I listened to more advice as well.
Do you come from a family of entrepreneurs?
Not at all. My dad was a civil servant. My mom was a guidance counselor.
Oh wow.
All basically civil servants. So my dad thought I was insane. Immigrant family, right? Like I like
Yeah.
to tell people I was made in Taiwan, and so we came over here when I was quite young. And my parents wanted to be, you have your choice. You can be a doctor, an engineer, maybe a lawyer if you're really a bit of a failure. That's how
Yeah.
they viewed it, right? So engineer,
Wow.
doctor. And then so when I went into architecture, they flipped out. They're like, what do you mean architecture? What kind of flaky, artsy thing is that? And they kicked me out of the house, actually.
Oh,
Um,
wow. No.
oh yeah. And so when I started my business while studying architecture, they really thought I was crazy. My dad, by the time I was 25, I was driving a Porsche. I had a beautiful house. I had a nanny, and my dad referred to me as the bike mechanic to his friends. Did not give me any credit for,
Wow.
having my own business, building a lot of success over the years. That's how he looked at it. So I always sort of had that, you know, had to prove my dad wrong
Sure.
kind of thing. And it
Yeah.
wasn't until my 30s that my dad finally came around and went, okay, maybe being an entrepreneur is your thing.
Yeah.
You've kind of reinvented yourself. Your business is prospering again. You pulled yourself out of the ashes. So maybe you got something here. So he started giving me a little bit of credit in my late 30s. And that meant a lot to me, actually. It meant a
Sure.
lot that because he didn't come from that world. He didn't
Right.
understand that world. So it was quite vindicating for me.
Sure. Oh, absolutely. Because I feel like there's a culture thing there where the parents expect you to be a certain thing, and when you're not that, it kind of freaks them out.
Oh, 100%. And
You know.
and as a father of three kids, I really tried to not put that kind of baggage on my kids, right? Like I don't expect any of them to be an entrepreneur and they can do what they want. And I'm there to really just coach them on, how do you become self-sufficient? How do you become successful in your own right, whatever definition. My son's an award-winning chef.
Oh
He's
wow.
I call him Chowmanian because he's half Chinese, half Romanian. So he's he
My husband's Romanian.
Oh, really? Well,
Yeah.
you should check out his new book. I'll send you the link afterwards.
Sure.
My
Okay.
son's name is Han Chang. He just launched his first cookbook, and it's a take on 11 of his favorite recipes from his childhood, growing up with his Mika, his his grandmother on the his Romanian side.
Yeah.
And so I think for him, he's created his own success in his own way. My daughter is a marketing executive. She's created her own success. My youngest daughter is in the travel. They've all have their own definition of
Yeah.
success, and I love it. One thing I said to my kids is, look, I don't need you guys to take care of me when we get old. I just don't want to have to take care of you when I get
Yeah.
old. So
Yeah. Right.
be self-sufficient, right?
Yeah. Exactly. That's awesome. Yeah. I can't wait to see that book. What do you think are some basic ex lessons that you learned from the failure of that first business? You did mention cash flow, but is there something else that you could share with us that the audience, like, because I have a lot of entrepreneurs that listen. Maybe
Yeah.
they're struggling and going through some struggle right now that maybe your advice could be helpful for them.
Surround yourself with smart people and listen to them. That's one
Mm,
of the best things I learned. I had a great mentor, sort of in my 40s, I would say early 40s. I met a fellow by the name of Stephen Bevis. He's actually a CEO coach, by the way, if you want to check him out.
okay.
I believe he coaches for a company called CEO Coaching. He's amazing. He brought Home Depot to Canada. He's American from Boston.
Oh,
He brought
wow.
Home Depot to
Okay.
Canada, he founded a great specialty retail business called Golf Town, which eventually bought Golfsmith in the States. So he started working with me when he was one store in Toronto, and between him and we helped build this into a $400 million company. And one of the things he was a genius at was surrounding himself with smart, talented people,
Mm,
and he was also genius at asking what I call the stupid question. He asked the
mm,
question that nobody else in the room, because we were too proud or too
yeah.
insecure to ask the obvious questions. He asked those obvious questions. I asked him why once. Why do you ask the obvious question? He goes, because people don't ask these questions because they think it's too
Yeah.
obvious, but you get these incredibly different answers to these questions. And that often gives you the insights that other people miss. So,
Yeah.
being able to ask questions, be curious, surround yourself with really smart people, because there is no such thing, as I said earlier, as a self-made success story.
Yeah.
We all need help to get there. And I wish I knew that when I was younger.
Yeah, especially if someone's already been there, done that. Why not learn from their mistakes and their lessons to prevent like what happened to you? You know, if you've already built up this massive success, and even though my late husband, he had a loan pulled for his business, and it was it was not a fun experience. So I know how that is. And if you're totally fine, you're not behind any payments, and the bank pulls the loan, that's it. It's all over. So I think that that is an incredible thing for people to understand, especially entrepreneurs, that it's okay to ask for help. It's okay to find someone. And I think mentoring is a big thing now, having a coach,
Huge.
someone that, like that's, I think it's very, I talk to a lot of coaches, and I think there's a coach out there for everyone because they're all so different, and they're also very knowledgeable and have a different levels of expertise.
There's a reason why Tiger Woods had a coach throughout his entire career.
Mm.
And he moved for different coaches because he kept wanting to improve. He wanted to learn from other people. There's a reason why the best sports teams and athletes in the world have a coach. Most great executives I know has had a mentor or coach of
Mm.
some sort. So I think a lot of entrepreneurs, we think, we got to be that,
Yeah.
individualist, and it's really, a fallacy. It's a mythology, essentially. The
Yeah.
other thing that I would say is, take your time to really fall in love with the problem versus just trying to sell your solution. As
Mm.
entrepreneurs, we're ideas people, right? Like,
Yeah.
oh, I got this idea and that idea. And honestly, ideas are kind of a dime a dozen, right? You
Yeah.
need to bench test your ideas. And the best way to bench test them is to actually look at the market, look at the audience and go, what do they really need actually? What do they actually want? Like, my company, the TurnLab, we're a marketing technology company, but we're also an incubator. And in the middle of the pandemic, we were seeing all these problems, and we were basically looking, what are the big problems to solve out there? And one of the problems that kept coming up was this kind of growing collaboration deficit amongst knowledge workers who are working remotely. So all these
Yeah.
people like trying to do what we're doing on Teams and Zoom and whatever,
Right.
instead of collaborating in person, they were losing, they're having a belonging deficit, mental health issues, creativity was being challenged, product
Yeah.
quality was being challenged. So we launched this startup called Just Boardrooms, justboardrooms.com, and all it is an Airbnb for professional meeting spaces. So that we
Cool.
didn't we didn't start with the solution. We looked at
Yeah.
the problem, go, how do we create a frictionless way for people to come together for moments that matter? So look, we're not going back to 5 days a week, highly unlikely. We're probably going
Right.
to be relatively hybrid, but how do we make it easy for people to come together when and where they want, with their clients, with their teams, whatever? So that's an example of falling in love with a problem
Yeah.
and then coming up with a solution, which is by the way, the product is going really well. Like we're
I
growing
would imagine.
compound. Oh yeah, it's growing like 40% compounded month over month
Wow.
because we weren't trying to sell a solution into a market that didn't need it. We try to understand the problem first, and then we built the product to fit the problem. And I think a lot of entrepreneurs, they get so attached to the solution that they bury themselves trying to make a solution successful, even though it's actually not solving the problem.
Yeah, no, that's so ingenious. I think that, I mean, do you have any just boardrooms here in the US, or just strictly in
We
Canada?
do. We have
Yeah.
most of our locations are actually in the US. That's our fastest growing
Wow.
sector. So we're in about 50 cities. And we have a few, I think we have a few locations in Chicago. We're just starting to get some in Chicago now.
Okay.
But we're in like Dallas and
Yeah.
Austin and Portland, sorry, Seattle, and a whole bunch of other cities. We're growing quickly because again, it's a need that we
Yeah.
identified that we try to come up with the right product to do it. I think when I was younger, I fell in love with my big idea and
Sure.
I didn't do enough diligence. And so, there's this crazy thing called Google now where you can do a ton
Yeah.
of research just on your own, right?
Yeah.
In our case at the TurnLab, we really invest in research. Like we host our own 10,000 member consumer panel. We have
Wow.
analysts, researchers, syndicated tools. So we do that because most of our clients are, they range from startups to enterprise, and they also fall into the same track of why can't I sell more of these widgets? I said, well,
Mhm.
who are you actually trying to sell them to, and what do they actually need? And
Yeah.
so by investing in a bit of research, most business leaders can learn a lot in terms of the strategy for their company, the strategy for their product.
What's good, everyone? This is your host, Deanna Radulescu with Label Free Podcast. So I'm very much into my vitality, my health and wellness, fitness, all those things. So I love the telehealth concierge services. I'm not sure if you're familiar with those, but there's an online telehealth resource to help you with your health and wellness, sexual health, weight loss, peptides, what have you. And I really enjoyed the last therapy I did with them. This time I'm doing weight loss, you guys, because I've been a little bit slowing down here at this age, and I'm looking for something to boost that metabolism. I highly recommend Valhalla Vitality. I have a discount code for you, Deanna15, and I will have the link in the description below for you to go sign up, check them out, get your appointment scheduled. You'll have a meeting with a great telehealth doctor, supervisor, consultant that will walk you through what it is that you're looking for to improve in your vitality. Again, this is Deanna Radulescu with Label Free Podcast, and I'm here to endorse Valhalla Vitality. When you ask them those questions, do they always have the answer, or do they not always have the answer to that?
You know what? I work with some great leaders, some of whom are really smart and they know their stuff. I have a company I work with called Mattamy Homes. They're the largest privately held home builder in North America. They're in US and Canada. And it's talking to the founder and talking to their Canadian CEO. I just couldn't believe just how humble these guys are. Like they've been in the business for 40 odd years. They're a multi-billion dollar business.
Yeah.
And when I talked about the customers, you know what they say? They go, let's find out more. Let's ask them. Let's do some research. So even though they probably do know their customer really well, they're always curious. They're always wanting to learn more. They're always investing in research. That's probably why they're number one, right? I think the really smart, great leaders are humble enough to know that they don't know everything. And that's really important for them to ask the most important stakeholder, which is their customer.
Yeah, for sure. I think sometimes entrepreneurs and leaders of large companies, they can lead more with their ego and not, you mentioned that they are humble. And I think that ego gets in the way a lot and sometimes prevents people really stepping into the true success that they deserve, and being an example for others to lead with being humble and wanting to learn more, because that is a gift. Because not all men that are in powerful positions are humble, and it's unfortunate.
I read something that female CEOs tend to have a higher success rate as startup founders. And I think that comes from, I think that was in Harvard Business Review, actually, I read that. And I think that comes from a lot of women just have a lot less ego attachment to the usual tropes of success, right? So, most female CEOs that I work with and I know socially are more curious, tend to be more humble, and they actually lean in and try to find out more, have more conversations. Most men CEOs, especially the entrepreneurs I know, they're very, very strong-minded, strong-willed, and often they kind of bowl their way through and sometimes they find quite a bit of success. But if you look at the trajectory, the arc of a lot of these very successful CEOs, they often plateau out and then even peter out, because what happens is what took them there isn't good. What took them here isn't necessarily going to get them there. And then they get stuck in that, no, my way or the highway. And then they start actually losing ground. So I think remaining constantly curious and constantly willing to learn is a huge attribute for any leader.
Yeah, for sure. I think you could be a coach. You got some great knowledge there. So tell us about TurnLab. So it is a marketing tech biz firm, and then also an incubator. So what does that mean?
Yeah, so I owned an ad agency. I founded an ad agency years ago that was a great agency. We were 20 years old. We were, 65 people doing, traditional advertising, like, campaigns, branding, media for all kinds of, big global brands, national brands. But about maybe 7 or 8 years ago, I really started to see the writing on the wall where, agencies were seen more as the hands and less as the heads of for these C-suite leaders. And consultancies were getting in there, like the PwCs, the Deloittes, and the Accentures were kind of getting in there and taking up the space, even around marketing. And so that kind of coincided with a cancer diagnosis, actually. So I was diagnosed with prostate cancer back in 2017, and I was thinking about, what am I going to do with my life, right? So as I was, fighting cancer, which, can be a bit of a shit show. Luckily, I'm through it now, and I'm cancer free, thank goodness.
Thank God.
but it was not fun in the process, believe me. But in that process, I had to rethink a lot of things, and one of which was my business. So I said, listen, I don't think the traditional agency model is going to be sustainable, especially now in the age of AI and whatnot
Yeah.
that can actually do creative with only some word prompts. What I thought about is how do we be more useful to those business leaders that are
Mm.
have big problems to solve? And so we launched this idea of a consultancy-led marketing technology company, a company that could actually go in and help companies fall in love with a problem, do
Yeah.
research, build a strategy, and then execute whatever is needed to fulfill the strategy, which might involve technology, it might involve some marketing, but it was agnostic around what that was. So we started
Yeah.
with like 12 people, handful of people, and in 2018, and I was just coming through my cancer treatments, and I was launching this company, and we're now almost 55 people, and we're doing a ton of business with some great brands. But the other piece of the puzzle is we're also an incubator. So one of the things I decided, because I've been doing this a long time, is how do we create products? How do we give back? How do we solve
Right.
problems outside of just serving our clients? And
Yeah.
and we love doing work for our clients, but we also wanted to look at how do we do things that for the greater good, so to speak. So we are a purpose-driven company, so we run carbon neutral. We're certified B Corp, like a Ben and
Wow.
Jerry's, Patagonia, that ilk. So we really wanted to go, how do we do some good? So, Just Boardrooms is an example. We also help coach and mentor other startups as well,
Okay.
especially ones that are doing good. We're giving some coaching advice to a company that's trying to launch a cycling marketplace, another company
Mm.
that's launching living walls.
Wow.
So we try to help startups that are kind of like trying to do some good in the world. So yeah, so I think the TurnLab is an interesting one because we're not an
Yeah.
agency per se, but we're a company that can come in and we're like a special team that can go in and help companies solve problems and leverage marketing and technology to really drive their business agenda forward.
Fascinating. I love it. And yes, AI is a very powerful tool if you use it right.
It is. Listen, we had a hilarious moment. I hired a new CEO for the TurnLab because I'm splitting my time between Just Borders and the TurnLab now, and
Right.
she's a wonderful woman, Stephanie Hurst. She ran a big creative agency for years, and she came on board and she wanted to build an AI task force. This was like about a year ago when she started, because she really wanted us to understand it and to really have the right
Yeah.
strategy. And as she was saying this, one of our developers, we have about 9 in-house programmers because we do a lot of digital commerce. He kind of sheepishly put up his hand and said, "Oh, well, we've been using AI for about 2 years for programming." And she's like, "What?" And so our teams are already using AI. And so
Yeah.
what we've done now is we've created some guardrails, some standard operating procedures around how we
Right.
leverage AI for content creation, for development programming. So it's here.
Yeah.
100%. Whether it's ultimately going to be for good or evil, we don't know. But as every business leader I've talked to has stated, is that we need to keep very close eye on
Yes.
how it's being used and leveraged, both
Yeah.
for business as well as for society in general, right? AI is a powerful tool, and will machines become self-aware at some point? Absolutely. And
Yeah.
ultimately, we have to decide how are we going to coexist with sentient machines, essentially.
Right.
So it's
Yeah.
it's um it's not a if, it's definitely a when. And I think in business, so whether you're a Sam Altman or a Tim Cook at Apple, we all, even at any level, we have to be on top of this 100%. We cannot assume that someone else is going to take care of this.
Yeah. No, I agree. I actually had a gentleman on the show that was part of the beta test for ChatGPT, and we had a conversation about the moral side of things and how there's a responsibility of who's ever managing that to make sure that the moral standard is high, so that as these machines or AI gets smarter, that they, I guess, essentially are being programmed the right way. I don't know if I'm saying that correctly, but
Yeah.
that was what the basis of the conversation was. It was very interesting. I learned a lot, and so yeah, I mean, it'll be. I think it's great because I use it for good, but I'm sure there's people out there that would want to use it for bad.
Oh, they're
And
doing it now. They're
yeah,
doing it now. Deep
sure,
fakes and all that. The hackers are using it. In in one of Isaac Asimov's books, I think years ago, a great science fiction writer, he wrote about the three laws of robotics, and one of them was, a robot can't harm a human kind of thing, right? So, well,
Right.
we don't have the three laws of AI, right? Like we
Right.
haven't created those. We don't have any actual parameters built into code that would
Yeah.
stop AI from going, well. Actually, I think humans are the problem and then doing something about it, right? Like
Right.
we don't have any of that. So
Yeah.
that's the guardrails that have to be put in place. So whether that's government legislation, which I think definitely will play a role, government
Sure.
legislation, because people talk about big government, blah blah. But you know what? Without the laws of the land, like things like speed limits and no, you can't shoot somebody with a
Yeah.
gun, like without those kind of laws, we would be in absolute anarchy. So if you look
Yeah.
at AI, we need some laws in place so that it doesn't become absolute anarchy.
Yeah. When you said that humans are the problem, it reminded me of the movie with Will Smith, I, Robot. I don't know if you ever saw it.
Yes.
Yeah. So, anyways, Howard, oh my gosh, fascinating. I love you're very just, you've got a lot to offer. Where can people find you, connect with you, and learn more about your journey?
Yeah, well, definitely check out the turnlab.com. You can email me right from that website. You can also check out justboardrooms.com
Yeah.
and book a boardroom on demand. Check it out. We are launching more and more every week in the US. And you can follow me on X. I'm at AdCycle, or you can check me out on LinkedIn, Howard Chang.
Perfect. You guys, I'll put those links in the show notes. So if you connected with Howard's story, want to learn more, or just learn more about Just Boardrooms or the TurnLab, go ahead and click those links, check it out, and don't forget to follow him on social. Howard, this is the part of the show where I like to ask for last words of wisdom or advice. What would you like to leave with us today?
Wow, that's a good one. There's so many things that are on my mind these days, but I think one of the things that I have thought a lot about in my career is how do we do good as we do well? I think a lot of it when we think about capitalism, we think it's shareholders, shareholders,
Yeah.
shareholders. I think in business more and more, if you think of what's happening in society now, if you look at all the strife and polarization in the world, how do we think more about stakeholders versus just shareholders, right?
Yeah.
I believe businesses can do good as we do well. So
Right.
whether you try to, operate like a Patagonia where you're, paying your workers better and you're giving back to society or you're thinking about the environment, I think the idea of baking in purpose into your leadership style is
Yeah.
100% necessary now. So if you're trying to figure out a way to galvanize your staff, galvanize your customers, to invest their dollars, their time and energy into a company that actually means something, really think about what you mean and what you stand for. And I think that's the next big movement for leaders right now is really establishing what they stand for and baking that into their business and their brand.
Yeah, I like that. I think that would be make a much better positive impact on things as we kind of move forward in this futuristic time. And like, I mean, things are changing so rapidly, and so I think that is a very good point. Howard, thank you for your time. Thank you for sharing your story and everything you've been through. It's fascinating. I think you need to write a book. I would buy it because you got a lot to share. So thank you very much. We appreciate you.
Thank you so much, Dan.
You're welcome. You guys, this is your host, Deanna Radulescu with Label Free Podcast. To live your best life, you must live label free. As always, don't forget to subscribe, follow, rate, review, comment, share, all those good things. And I'll be back soon with more dynamic guests.